What's up, guys? It's Jensen and welcome to another video. So I know the Brooklyn Nets have been a disappointment this year heading into All-Star break, obviously being 25 and 28. Kyrie Irving's been injured most of this year. Clearly not what most of us envisioned from the Brooklyn Nets this year. I mean, nobody expected NBA Finals or anything, but certainly we expected a more competitive squad than the one we've seen this year. And they've had their highs, they've had their lows, but I don't think it's time to give up on the Brooklyn Nets just yet. Maybe not as a Finals contender, but as a team that could maybe shake up the Eastern Conference. Brooklyn's a dangerous team, guys. And the main reason for this is Kyrie Irving. We look at this team, we know they're only 18th in points per game this year, but Kyrie Irving's barely played this year. If Kyrie Irving plays most of these games, I think they're closer to a top 10 offense. And when we look at Kyrie Irving, I know that sometimes we forget about these guys who are injured. You know, it's hard to remember some of these guys when Damian Lillard is doing his thing in Portland. We look at Kemba Walker leading a successful Boston team. We look at Russell Westbrook, and Houston's got something interesting going down there. When there's so many great point guards, it's sometimes easy to forget about these injured guys. Don't forget about Kyrie Irving, though, because what we know about him is that he's one of the greatest players in the half-court offense of all time. He's one of the most skilled players of all time, and like it or not, LeBron wouldn't have won with a John Wall or a Chris Paul during that Cleveland Cavaliers championship against Golden State. He wouldn't have won with one of those guys. He needed Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving, the clutch finisher. He had that amazing three-point shot, and he showed up in multiple games of the NBA Finals. He's an NBA champion, and that's not something that Giannis could say, not something that Embiid or Butler, or when we look at a guy like Kemba Walker, none of those guys can say they've been an NBA champion before. So he brings that pedigree, and you could question his leadership. You can question how he handles the media at times, and you can question his attitude at times, but you can't question the fact that this guy, when Kyrie Irving's at his peak, it's hard to think about a player who's been better at offense than Kyrie Irving. I mean, he's just spectacular to see, and if Kyrie is at his peak, he's a top 10 player in the NBA. That's very clear in my opinion. But when we look at the Brooklyn Nets, there are some other guys who deserve some recognition too. We look at a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, whom I know he's had his highs and lows this season, but at his peak, he's been an all-star caliber player. We look at Karis LeVert, and at the very least, he's a 15 to 20 point per game scorer. He's just a nice scorer. But I think there's all-star potential in LeVert. We look at his athleticism, and he's a walking bucket in my opinion at this point. But if LeVert can emerge as something heading later on to this season and into the playoffs, who knows? He could certainly be an X factor for the Brooklyn Nets. Then we look at a guy like Jared Allen, and Brooklyn, one of their strengths is rebounding. They're the second best rebounding team in the NBA, and a large part of that has to go to Jared Allen, and he's a freak at center. He has elite athleticism, and he's a force in the interior defense. We look at him on offense too. He's a pretty good dunker. We look at how he finishes in the paint, and I think he's a very valuable piece for what the Nets are doing. And to a lesser degree, you could say that about DeAndre Jordan too. We look at those two guys, and then we look at a guy like Joe Harris. He's a bona fide three-point sniper, and when we look throughout the history of the NBA, at least in the modern era, when we look at the NBA, having a three-point sniper has been so valuable to many of these teams. We look at Golden State with Klay Thompson. We look at the Miami Heat when they had Ray Allen. I mean, having a three-point sniper, that's important. And we look at Joe Harris, and he's as good as anyone in the NBA right now. But let's just look hypothetically throughout a potential playoff scenario. As of right now, they'd be faced up against the number 2 seed, the Toronto Raptors. And I've been very impressed with what I've seen from the Toronto Raptors this year, but if we're being honest, it's really the same team, except they took out Kawhi Leonard, the best player in the world, might I add, for OG Anunoby. No offense to OG Anunoby, who's been playing very well, but in the playoffs, that might cost the Toronto Raptors. And I know Siakam has stepped up, Van Vliet has stepped up, even Serge Ibaka has stepped up, and Anunoby, as mentioned before, he's actually been playing pretty well. But the bottom line is that if we see a peak Kyrie playing for the Brooklyn Nets, if Dinwiddie is being closer to the all-star self than the disappointment, if LeVert maybe steps up and fulfills his potential all-star potential, and we look at a guy like Jared Allen, if he's a force on interior defense, I mean, the Brooklyn Nets could win in a potential 6 or 7 game series. It's not inconceivable. The key would be Kyrie Irving And his pedigree, his clutch ability, his ability to create half-court offense, especially in the playoffs when fast break points become less and less common. A guy like Kyrie Irving who can create half-court offense, that's invaluable for an NBA team. Then we look at them playing potentially the Milwaukee Bucks. And obviously, the peak Milwaukee Bucks are better than the peak Brooklyn Nets, and that's a fact. But at the very least, the Nets are a headache for the Milwaukee Bucks, maybe a 5 or 6 game series. You have to give Kyrie at least one game if he's playing at his peak. But, I mean, if Giannis doesn't step up like he kind of diminished last year in the playoffs, if that happens again, if Middleton is airballing three-pointers with playoff games on the line, if Bledsoe becomes a shell of himself in the playoff scenarios, then, it's not inconceivable that the Brooklyn Nets with Kyrie Irving, Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, even Taurean Prince, he's a nice small forward. Could they maybe win in a Game 7? Hypothetically, in a Game 7, would you take the team with Kyrie Irving or the team with Giannis Antetokounmpo? Me personally, I'll take the team with Kyrie Irving, the clutch finisher. He can create a half-court offense. He never fails to show up under pressure. I'll take a team with Kyrie Irving. And while obviously it'd be very unlikely for the Nets to even be in that position against Milwaukee, it's not inconceivable. That's what makes the Nets such a dangerous team. If Kyrie Irving can join the troops together, if he can be that leader, and if he can step up in the playoffs like we know he has in the past, the Nets are a dangerous team. Watch out, guys. Don't sleep on the Brooklyn Nets because they could step up, but it all depends on Kyrie Irving. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Please like and subscribe. I'll be providing more NBA and NFL content as the season goes on. And have a good day and make